Holy Mary, Mother of God. Today we are going to go a little deeper into our own charisma as Scalabrinians. We're going to talk about community, how to build community. And then this afternoon and tomorrow we're going to talk about the vows: poverty, chastity, obedience. So first of all, let me ask you, what is the most important work for us Scalabrinians? Guide the migrants, take care of the migrants. Yes, but it's not the most important. Eh? Hospitality is good, but before that is building a community. Because if we are able to build a community inside, we are going to also be able to build community outside. But if we don't have like the design or the plan of our community inside, it's not going to work outside. So the most important work, the first job when we go to a parish, is not to start building a new church or building a center. The first job we have to do is to build a community, because then the migrants, by looking at our community, they have an idea how to build their own parish community. Like in Pompeii, we have 4 communities. We have English, naturally, because it's the land. We have Italian, who built that church. We have Brazilians for many years that have been worshiping there, because also many of our priests come from Brazil. And the Filipino, about 15 years ago, Father Bob Season started the Filipino community. Now it's very big, very growing. As a matter of fact, tomorrow in church in Pompeii, the Apostolic Nuncio of the UN, United Nations, Bernardito Ausa, with 6 other bishops and 60 priests, they're going to have a whole day reunion there in our church. They're going to celebrate Mass, they go downstairs, they have dinner, they have social, because they realize that is one of the most important centers for Filipino community. And so you see that why do we have this beautiful parish with 4 different communities? Because inside the rectory we had priests from different communities living together, showing how we can live together with so many different cultures. So the most important thing is that we need to build community. You remember in the beginning of our congregation, Bishop Scalabrini started gathering diocesan priests, and he asked them to have 5 years promise that they were going to work with the migrants and then they come back. But immediately after, he realized that he needed a religious congregation, because the priests, they were remaining individuals, good, great priests, but they were not forming communities. And that, for Scalabrini and for us, is the main object of our apostolate: building communities, which is not easy, especially among different cultures. I tell you that when I arrived, there was Tuesday, Monday or Sunday, whatever, I was really surprised. I felt very good among you, because I see you from so many different cultures and countries. This is a real sign of the Scalabrinian community, because we come from so different cultures and countries and nations, but we are one. We live together, we work together, we help each other. So you see that the main and most important thing when we get out there is to build community. And at times it's not easy, but if everybody has the same will, the same desire to build community, then community will work. Sometimes we don't have the same understanding, but that's important also in the seminary to understand that the first job then when we go out there is to build community, because then from that community we can go out and build other community with the migrants. As you know, Bishop Scalabrini wanted to give more efficacy to his ministry, to the ministry of migrants, and that's why he somehow asked that the Pious Society, as it was mentioned, named before, became a religious community. It says, our founder wanted us to be an apostolic community, and more precisely a religious congregation, because he wanted to guarantee the efficacy of our dedication to the service of migrants and the stability of the institute. In fact, the mission we have received from the Church takes on meaning and credibility if in the process of proclaiming the message of Christ, we live in fellowship with Him and with our brothers. We choose to live a community life. So, meaning and credibility. If we go out and preach to the migrants, we have to be all brothers, we have to help each other, we have to accept each other. And then we do not accept or work together with my brother in the house, my message has no credibility. Because they say, you guys first, you try it yourself first to live in community, then come and preach to us. So it is important. Scalabrini saw this very clearly. And then it says, we choose to live a community life in the practice of the evangelical counsels and resolve to become a sign. This is important, a sign of liberation and salvation to the migrants, and a witness of brotherhood and unity in the world which is mostly divided. So sign and witness, that's important. Our community, even if we don't say a word to the migrants, but by the fact that we are united in community, the migrants see a sign of their lives together. So it is a sign and a witness. And to me, this is something that we have to stress a lot in our community. Why? When 1970, many years ago, I was sent to New York to study. Most of the priests were Italians, most of them. And when we used to get together, what do we have? Spaghetti, the first thing. A good glass of wine. And then a song. I remember we are all used to sing Sul Ponte di Bassano. One day you find out this song, which is built because the main seminary was in Bassano, and there was this bridge, a very famous bridge, and they made a song. By singing that song, we felt so united. After a few years, few Italians. I remember I was in formation, and one of the Haitian seminarian, he said, you guys, you think you make community because you all eat spaghetti. I says, no, it's not only that. But that is one thing that helps us, to be together. But he was smart. He says, I am a Haitian. I don't eat spaghetti. So if you put the community spirit in the spaghetti, I am out. Because I don't eat spaghetti. You see, he made me think. He's right. Because if we build community in our culture, then we leave everybody else out. One culture, dominant culture. No. Today, in the United States, we Italians are the minority. Because no more priests coming from Italy. We get old and die. And also the migrants, because the migrants, so many, have integrated into society. So I say, if we build community in the so-called Italian culture, it's finished. But that's why I said, when I walk into this seminary, I see so many cultures. And what is that makes us one? What is that makes us a community? And we'll see. Prayer life, the same goal, the migrants, And most of all, being able to enjoy one another. Remember that when you go to a house and you see one who is in the kitchen preparing the food, the other is preparing the table, the other is bringing out the wine, and you see everybody working together and to have a celebration, then you say, wow, this is good. This is the community spirit. It doesn't matter what you eat or what you drink, but it is the community spirit. So remember, the first and most important work is to go out and build community. Because with a community, first of all, you feel at home. You like to go home. Now sometimes in my life, I didn't want to go home because the pastor was always nagging or was telling me that I didn't know. I remember Father Alvirio reminded me a little story. I think it was the second year of my priesthood. I was at Hamilton, Ontario, with an older priest and a younger priest, and myself just out of the seminary. And I felt that these two guys say, oh, this little kid is coming out of seminary, thinks he knows everything, he can do everything, says we're going to put him in his place. That was the feeling I had. One day, there was a drunk man came in. Oh, by the way, the pastor told me, says, at 10 o'clock you must be home because only prostitutes and thieves are out there, and so you cannot stay out there with them. And secondly, after 6 o'clock, you do not open the door to anybody because it says you don't know who is around. Okay. But one day at 7 o'clock, someone rings the bell and I open the door. And there was this drunken man. He was smelling alcohol all over the place. And so he almost fell on me as soon as he came into the door. So I hold him and says, hey man, what do you want? Ah, Father, I have to talk to you. So okay, let's sit down here. No, he says, yesterday a friend of mine was killed in a house burned down and he was inside, he died. We have to kneel down because it says we have to pray for this man. Okay, so then he kneels down. No, you two have to kneel down. Okay, so I kneel down. We are kind of holding each other, kneeling down, and we start the Our Father. In that moment, the pastor comes saying, and he sees the two of us there kneeling. What are you doing? He says, get out of here. No, I told you many times not to open the door. And I didn't know what to do. So he says, please get out. He says, I helped him up and threw him out to the door. So, I tell you this because I was young, maybe inexperienced, but I didn't feel welcome in that house. I felt that, they were there just to control me or to tell me that whatever I learned in the seminary was no good and that I was coming to destroy their parish. So, see, that's not the community spirit. And when someone, I remember that I wanted to stay out of the house more time as possible because I didn't like to be home. When I was home, I had to go and lock myself up in my room because I didn't feel that relationship with them. I have to say that after a while, we were able really to become good friends. Actually, one of them is Father Camilo. He's celebrating 50 years of his priesthood in Canada now, and we are still very, very close. But, that was my first impact from the seminary into the parish. I didn't feel welcome. And that is a dangerous place to be. Because if you don't find support in your house, you go and look for support someplace else. And sometimes you find the wrong support, And and that could really mean a lot. So what I say is the first most important job that we have to do is to build community. Then number 10 of the Constitution says something very beautiful. It says, our communities have an eminently apostolic meaning because by the unity of the brethren, they show that the Lord has come, and thus they become the source of great energies for the apostolate. great energy for the apostolate comes from the community. By their action, and indeed by their very presence, they contribute to changing the relationship among men and women in the world of migration. And in this way, share in the birth of a new humanity. These are words, prophetic words. Imagine if we were able to incarnate, to make present the idea of Scalabrini, a world without borders, a free world where human beings can help each other, human beings can welcome each other without too many borders, too many passports, or too many visas. Today we are very advanced, but we treat human beings worse than the animals. For instance, a little bird can go from the United States to Canada with no passport. He can go, he doesn't need any visa. And he can go this side to eat and then go back home the other side. No problem. We human beings cannot do that. We need passports, we need visa, then we need the jobs. And is it possible that we cannot understand that the world is for everybody? Okay, here there is the whole idea of selfishness, pride or whatever. But that's if we here can show that Vietnamese can live with Indonesians, with Filipinos, with Brazilians. Who else is here? Spanish? No. And Italians, the old Italians. So if we can show that, the world can learn. But if we do it here, why can't we do it there? Why can't we start organizing this idea, a world without borders? For instance, nowadays in Europe, you have the whole crisis of the European Union. But it is a great idea. And I hope it works, even though England is going out. Because you go to Europe, you don't have to go every country, because there are small countries there, for a new visa, new passport. Before, I remember, if you had to go from Italy to England, you needed the visa for going through France. And so you have to get Italian, French, and then finally England. Now you can go freely. Now they are trying to do the same thing between the United States and Canada. And hopefully, who knows when, with Mexico and Latin America. So you see, it is an idea which is very important. But it has to start with us, has to start in our house. Now, the Scalabrini wanted to have a community, diversified community. It means religious priests and religious brothers. You know that he wanted to send was 6 priests and 4 brothers. The first that he sent to New York, and but then it was even more. He says that in 1988, in 2 years, he realized. In 1889, to realize he sent 24 priests and 6 lay brothers to the missions, both North and South America. His mind was comprehensive. That means he included a lot of people. Then we talk also about the San Refuge Society for the lay people. But brothers for Scalabrini were very important. He used to call them catechists, brother catechists. Because it says he saw already that in immigration you need a lot of things. You don't need only the Mass or the sermon or the baptism. You also need the schools. For instance, he insisted that the parishes would have their schools to maintain the culture of the immigrants. He insisted that one of the brothers would be catechist and also take care of the sick. In those days, to take a trip from Europe to America, it took a month. And many times, as we see with Father Marchetti, and many times during the trip, they used to die. And these kids were left alone. So Scalabrini had a very comprehensive idea of the apostolate. It was not just liturgy. It was liturgy, it was culture, and it was assistance. And I think this should be rediscovered. I think in our community today, we didn't do enough to attract brothers. I give you an example what a brother can do in our community. First of all, he can take care of the administration. When I got to Pompeii, there was Brother Michael Lamantia, who now has died. But he used to run the place. And the priest was just coming down for the Mass and goodbye, because he took care of everything. He took care of the ladies' auxiliary. He took care of maintaining the building when something was breaking down. And so practically he was running the place, a brother. Then, for instance, we did catechesis. We have a brother in Los Angeles, Brother Muscat, and he is running the whole catechetical program of the parish. The pastor doesn't have to do anything because he's really organized. You know how much good you can do by directing catechism because you have all the parents. You know, he knows more parents than the priest because through the catechism, through the children, he's in touch with all these families. The liturgy. Who is going to take care of the altar boys? Who is going to take care of the flowers? Who is going to take care of the decorations and different times of the year? Brother. Who is going to take care of the sick and the shut-in? For instance, in New York, there are a lot of older people. They don't come down anymore because they can't walk. And he used to go and visit one by one. And they all, when you were in the office, 9 phone calls were for Brother Michael and the others was for the priest, out of 10. See, so it is important to understand the brothers are very, very valuable. Casa Migrantes. You know, we have, especially between United States and Mexico, we have 3 or 4 Casa del Migrante. And there is the brother. That's the job of the brother, to welcome these migrants, to help them find their way home. And so it is very important. Communication media. You know, I happen to be involved in, I don't know why, but maybe I like it. And radio, television, newspapers, they're all jobs for the brothers. That's their charisma, their help. Center of Congregation Studies, we have Brother Gioacchino, I think he's in Rome, and he has a PhD in sociology. And many times the superior says, why don't you want to become a priest? And says, no, I want to be a brother. And he's a brother. But now he's teaching university courses because he has prepared for that. So you go political advocacy. You know, I worked in an institution called ACIM, American Italian Committee on Migration. And at a certain point in 1964, that ACIM had chapters all over the United States. They were in touch with most of the members of parliament, and they were able to pass the Immigration Act, which is the last reform that the United States made on the immigration law. Thanks to this organization, which was headed by one Scalabrinian, but he was there even before. But they were able to change the law in the United States. And since then, 1964, they did a few adjustments, but they never had a comprehensive reform. So you see, if we could have a brother who can organize all the states and get in touch with all the members of parliament, he could do what in Washington they cannot do, that is to change the laws. So you see, bishops' conferences, diocesan bishops. You know, we don't need a priest in an office for the apostolate. We don't need a priest, to stay there all day just to organize different activities. We need a brother. A brother can do it. So you see that I believe that we somehow forgot the whole idea and charisma of the brothers. And we should go back and try to revive that idea which comes straight from Scalabrini. Remember, the first 2 years he sent 24 priests, 16 brothers. He always wanted to have them together. Another aspect which is coming back now is the lay Scalabrinians. You remember we spoke about St. Raphael Society. St. Raphael Society was in New York before we built the Church of Pompeii. The Scalabrinians were in the other side of town with St. Joachim, and this side there was the St. Raphael Society, and which is close to my church. I go many times. I took picture of the house. Is still there. Now it's not ours anymore. But the St. Raphael Society was the beginning of the activity for migrants in New York City. Father Bandini used to go every day to Ellis Island to welcome the immigrants. And from that place, the first Mass for that parish, which started the parish, was celebrated in the main office of this St. Raphael Society. So we have to kind of revive lay Scalabrinians. They are very, very important. Lay Scalabrinians and volunteers. Lay Scalabrinians are those who commit themselves even publicly to follow the charisma of Scalabrinians. And it is a great force. Maybe we have not taken advantage of these people who really devote their lives, their talents to help our charisma, our mission. And finally, volunteers. You know, it is something coming up very now. I give you an idea. In my church, we have at least 5 volunteers. 2 come from Italy. 1 is there from there. 2 are from there, and 1 is coming now. But what do you mean? There are people, especially young people, that they would be willing to give you 6 months of their lives, especially before they start their career. There are young people that are already professionals, but they have this calling to work for the church. And if he makes room for them, they come. I have one young lady there. She's there for a year now, and she's the director of the Italian Catholic television program that we started in the parish. And she does. And I follow her a little bit in the iPhone, and every day almost she puts out a new film about, this week is about the GMG, that means the World Youth Day, but you should see how devoted she is. And as I said, we have 2 more that are coming, and they are very committed. These are all the new missionaries that we have to gather and motivate and join our charisma. Then, after the lay people, we talk about religious, because we cannot forget about religious, our charisma. And I think it is very important to say that there is a sentence in the constitutions which I like very much. It says, one for all and all for one, especially in terms of prayer life. We have to feel all together, and if someone needs or is in need, we all run. If everybody is committed to help everybody else, then the community is very strong, very, very solid. So I insist on this because, it is something that maybe sometimes we lack in our communities. We feel responsible for each other. If you look in the family, everybody is responsible for everybody else. And everybody is trying to help everybody else. And this should be the community. The community should be the place where everybody is for everybody else. Now let me go a little bit. We are going to follow this book, which is very simple but very well done, because it gives you 1 page by each topic. For instance, lay brothers. As I have told you, says Scalabrini wanted since the beginning. He wanted to have lay brothers working together with the priest. Then it was apostles of the sheep. It is the constitutions single out ministry to seafarers as a viable Scalabrini apostolate. So the church has to accompany the seafarers, caring for their special spiritual needs of those who, for various reasons, live and work in the maritime world. You imagine the uncertainty, to be always out there in the sea, and maybe a big wave comes and turn your ship around or down, and then you are finished. The living conditions, I went to see in New York a few of these boats, but these poor workers, they are treated like animals because they only have their own little hut, they have their food, and then work. So it is important also that as Scalabrinians we protect them. We see, for instance, if they have pension, if they have insurance, if their living conditions are human. So it is important. Then the great isolation. Imagine a young man, leave the wife and children at home, and for 6 months he's out there, and he doesn't see them anymore. Luckily now with all these iPhones and these Skype, we can see each other. But in the back, in my time, for instance, we had a place in 44th Street in New York where there was the seaport, and the sailors, they were mostly Italian, used to run to our place because we had 24 lines, telephone lines. And so they could go and call back home, because in those days there were no cellular phones. So they had to go, and they used to be there, have a nice meal. For them it was like going back home, even though their home was in Italy. Lay collaborators, again, the San Refuge Society, and religious life. First of all, again, we saw the other day the Word of God. Meditation is basic for Scalabrini. You cannot give up meditation if you want to continue to live as a religious. Then the love for the Eucharist, the second main point. You know, there were three things, a tripod for Scalabrini: Word of God, meditation, Eucharist, and Mary, the Blessed Mother. So you see that these are the three basic. So in our communities, we have to develop these three devotions, or these three aspects of our spirituality, because that's the community according to Scalabrini, Charisma. You know, there are many other communities, many different types of communities, but our community has to be based on these three things: Word of God, meditation, Eucharist, and Marian devotion. The Eucharist, he wrote so much about the Eucharist. He had 3 synods in his diocese centered on the Eucharist. So it's really, really important. Love for the church. And here to me is something that we Scalabrinians should have. Never criticize the Pope. Never. Because when you criticize the Pope, you put yourself above him. But above the Pope, there's only Jesus Christ, because he is the vicar of Jesus Christ. So as Scalabrinians, we have to follow Scalabrini. You know, Scalabrini, even though down in the Vatican they thought he was against the Pope, he was so deeply in love with the Pope. Just a little simple action or something that happened. You know, Leo XIII, he realized, no, let me start a little bit earlier. You know that the Vatican owned 3/4 of Italy. So with Scalabrini, Emanuele, Vittorio Emanuele, the government took over, practically stole all the territories of the Vatican. And they left a little Vatican state, where that is today, the Vatican. So the Pope says, the Italian government is against us, so I forbid any Catholic to participate in the government, which is Mason, which is against the church, which has done something illegal, unjust, took away all those properties. So the Catholics says, okay, let's stay out of this. But then they realize, wait a minute, if we keep the good people out of the government, the bad people are going to do whatever they want against us. And so Scalabrini started thinking that it was time to return, to go back, to be involved in politics. And Leo XIII, the Pope, had the same idea. But he couldn't say that because he would contradict himself. First he says, no, you cannot participate in politics. And now he says, no, you have to go back. So he asked Bishop Scalabrini to write a public letter in which he was inviting the Catholics to go back to politics. hell broke loose because all the bishops in Italy says, hey, see, you are against the Pope. You are disobedient to the Pope. By the way, you know that John 23rd, the Pope John 23rd, who was secretary to the Bishop of Bergamo, was totally against Scalabrini. You know that the beatification of Scalabrini stopped when John 23rd became Pope. He says, I don't want to talk about this guy because for me he was disobedient to the Pope. So I'm not going to make him a saint if he was disobedient to the Pope. In fact, it was John Paul I, a son of migrants, who somehow opened up again the case for Scalabrini, because he wrote a beautiful page saying Scalabrini was such a faithful servant to the Pope. When he wrote that letter on behalf of the Pope, he was criticized madly by the bishops in Italy. He didn't say a word. He didn't say, it was the Pope who suggested me to write the letter. He kept all the criticism from all the bishops in Italy, and he kept quiet. Later on, Leo XIII sent him a letter, and he wrote it in Latin because he didn't want any secretary to understand what was in the letter. And he offered Scalabrini to become a cardinal. Scalabrini answered back in Greek, and he says, I don't need any favor from you because I know how to serve the church and how to love the church. So he says, okay, I take this insult on your behalf because I love the church. So this is to say that Scalabrini will have a deep, really love. So much so that he was criticized in the church because he loved the church, because he wanted the church to be what it is today. The last thing I tell you, you know, the Pope up to the time of Scalabrini was a king because he had a big territory. 3/4 of Italy was under the Pope, and he was the king. So he had to collect the taxes. He had to get an army. He had to have jails, and like any other king, Scalabrini was the first one to say the Pope doesn't need all that. The Pope is a spiritual leader, not a political leader. And because of that, he was criticized again. But he was right, because finally we have a Pope who is not a political leader, but is a spiritual leader. So Scalabrini was a great man, a great vision. He understood. Too bad he was, too early. Then finally, the church kept up and came to understand the same thing that Scalabrini was able to understand. So love for the church is very, very important. And I say, and I can say clearly that even in the radio, every week I speak for an hour about what the Pope does and what the Pope says. Always to present the side of the Pope to the people. Because nowadays, even especially in the United States, there's a lot of criticism for this Pope because he doesn't follow the rules. But that's what he says. If we only follow the rules, we don't move, because it's always going to be the same thing and the same way. So love for the Pope is a Scalabrinian thing. It's just pray, protect, and defend the Pope. Then the Rosary. Let me just read something. Every day, Scalabrini used to consecrate himself to the Blessed Mother. A little consecration. And I want to read it to you, the prayer that he took from Saint John Bergman's. He says, Holy Mary, Mother of God and Virgin, I choose thee this day for my Queen, patron and advocate, and firmly resolve and purpose and propose never to abandon thee, never to say or do anything against thee, nor to permit that ought to be done by others to dishonor thee. Receive me then, I entreat you, as thy perpetual servant. Assist me in all my actions, and do not abandon me at the hour of my death. Amen. So Scalabrini used to say this prayer every day before he started his prayer as a consecration to the Blessed Mother. You know that he sold all the jewels of his mother to the Madonna di Bedonia in St. Mark's Church. So he gave all the jewels of his mother to the Blessed Mother in this crown of this Madonna di Bedonia. You know that he was so devoted to the shrine of Rivergaro, Madonna del Castello. By the way, our priests are still there today. They still minister that shrine, that he almost wanted to be buried not in the cathedral but in this shrine of Rivergaro. But then at the end, naturally, they buried him in the cathedral, so that he was so close to the Blessed Mother. The last Mass, a visit, it was on May 7, 1905, was the last visit before he died. And he went to this shrine in Rivergaro. That's why we as a Scalabrinian keep this shrine very close to us, because it was very close to Scalabrinian. So the Rosary, in the first rule, he had put down that every Scalabrinian was obliged to say the Rosary every day. Now, in our constitution today, it's not there, but still we follow the tradition of Scalabrinian. So it is, I say, it is very important for us to understand this. If we want to be real Scalabrinians, we have to build Scalabrinian communities. We do not succeed on our own, even though we might be the greatest missionary of the world, but we cannot work on our own. If we succeed as a community. And as a community, we need prayer in common. I have here in the Council of San Paolo, was asking Scalabrini to send a missionary out in the fazendas in the country. And he says, yes, says, I would, but I would not want to be my missionary separated from one another. And I have to say that even today, you need a brother. You need someone to feel like family. Because if you're alone, it's not a real religious life. It becomes like an individualistic life. Good, so I'm going to stop here. It says also talk about reciprocal forgiveness and fraternal correction. I think one of the most important and beautiful thing is to be able to tell your brother, listen, I think you're doing something wrong. I can help you to do something better. And the brother doesn't feel judged or put down. On the contrary, he says, thank you, brother, because you made me see what maybe I didn't see. So even fraternal correction is very, very important, to be able to talk freely with each other, because we love each other, not because we want to put people down. So this is very important. Remember, your first job when you get out of the seminary, build community, because it is the community that will become meaningful and witness for the migrants. And even if you don't do any preaching or anything, but you create a beautiful community, that's already a big sign, a big help for the work of migrants.